Hello everybody, Resonance here with another Pokemon Ultra Sun Ultra Moon Wi-Fi Battle Analysis, which explains the strategy and thought process for each player. You can find links to more of these below, as well as many comprehensive competitive tutorials. Thank you as always for the support. In this particular battle, I will be showcasing a Lycanroc Dusk team supported by a Mega Gardevoir, a Magician Delphox, and a Palossand, which I really wanted to experiment with. Let's jump straight into team preview. My team on the left features a defensive core of Rotom-Wash, Palossand, and Goodra, and I'll be strategically swapping between those to bait out a favorable matchup for either Delphox, Gardevoir, or Lycanroc to attack. Ideally, I'm looking for Delphox to somehow land a Solar Beam on Aurorus, and at this point I'm concerned that I don't have a great answer to Torterra, as I doubt he'd stay in on Goodra's Ice Beam. I assume that my opponent's team revolves around pivoting between Persian and Magneton, while wearing me down with the poison from Ariados, which will give him easy opportunities for either Aurorus, Torterra, or Feraligatr to snag a KO. So can I beat this, and if so, how? Well, Lycanroc will normally lose to Feraligatr, but I know that if I can get it to take Stealth Rock damage twice, then I can OHKO it with my Z move later. Setting that up will be extremely difficult though, since Palossand can only set up Stealth Rock safely against Magneton and Ariados. And I doubt that I can lead with it since I expected Torterra to be his own Stealth Rock user, and Persian is also a strong lead against Palossand. In this battle, we get to see how I fare against an equally skilled opponent, whether or not Delphox gets to do anything, and how strong Aurorus can be. I begin by leading with my Rotom-Wash, and he leads with his Alolan-Persian. Persian's gimmick is twofold. It's got Fur Coat as its ability, so it takes reduced damage from physical attacks. And it also gets a rare move called Parting Shot, which lowers both of my attack stats and switches it out on the same turn. I go for Will-O-Wisp while he goes for Fake Out. Fake Out always goes first, and always flinches, meaning it's a bit of guaranteed damage, but it can only be used on the first turn that a Pokemon is out. This is a great combination with Parting Shot on the following turn. Next turn, he uses Parting Shot, weakening my Rotom's damage output and giving him an advantageous switch into his Magneton. Meanwhile, I go for Volt Switch though, predicting his Magneton, which lets me finally send out Palossand safely. Stealth Rocks deals a bit of Rock-type damage to the opposing Pokemon on entry, and will be essential for Aurorus, Ariados, and Feraligatr. At this point, I'm a little worried though, as unless I can find a way to KO either Magneton or Persian and also cripple Aurorus, I think that his team will eventually outlast me. This seems like a nice opportunity to use Stealth Rocks, while he hopefully has to hard switch. However, his Magneton actually runs Toxic. Toxic will make my Palossand take an ever-increasing amount of damage each turn, until I switch out. Then the damage resets, but the Toxic status remains. This is going to prevent me from staying in with Palossand for too long. The Toxic was a pleasant surprise, a solid tech choice for Magneton to deal with ground types or special walls that it otherwise can't break. Despite the Toxic damage, I choose to stay in and go for Earth Power just in case he doesn't switch. He makes a good play by switching out into Torterra, which can take an Earth Power or Shadow Ball very well, and threatens me out since he now has a type advantage. In my opinion, Torterra is one of the more interesting starter Pokemon designs, and one of the many reasons why I love Gen 4 so much. This battle is excellent because not only are we each bringing interesting teams, but we also both play it extremely well. So now I withdraw my Palossand and go into Goodra, predicting a Wood Hammer or Stealth Rocks, since my Goodra's Sap Sipper ability makes it immune. Unfortunately for me, he reads that switch like a book and goes for Rock Polish instead. Rock Polish doubles his speed stat, allowing him to safely outspeed all of my team. I honestly didn't expect that, and I assumed that his moveset would be more supportive, but it makes sense that his team would need additional sweepers designed to clean up late game. The goal with sending out Goodra is that Gumshoe can threaten out Torterra with an Ice Beam, so I go for it, since I can't let him Earthquake me for free. Torterra is very bulky, but carries a 4 times weakness to Ice. Knowing that Torterra probably can't trade well with Gumshoe, even if it strikes first, he switches into Alolan-Persian, which takes a nice 45% from my Ice Beam. I now decide to switch out my Goodra for my Rotom-Wash, predicting a Fake Out which should do very little damage to Rotom's high defense stat. He makes the right play though by immediately using Parting Shot to send in Magneton. Since Parting Shot always happens after I hard switch, this line of play allows him to see what I switch into first, and then send out a counter, keeping momentum on his side. The chaotic switching continues as I double switch into Palossand, while he also simultaneously hard switches his Magneton into Aurorus. We're both doing everything that we can to get a positional advantage, carefully maneuvering around each other. I was hoping that he'd stay in, but he likely predicted my Palossand. The Aurorus switch was excellent, since the Ice typing covers my Palossand nicely. Aurorus is pretty slow, but packs a very high special attack stat, so you usually have to get a solid prediction to send it out, or use moves like Parting Shot and Volt Switch, of which he has both. It's at this point that I realize that his great series of plays has caught me out of position, and so I must offer him a Ritual Sacrifice. Palossand did about what I'd expect it to. It got up Stealth Rocks and used an attacking move. And so I let Aurorus snag the KO, because I really needed to scout his moveset and held item. I now send out my Lycanroc. In response, he swaps out into Magneton, but I boldly predict that switch and instantly KO it with a surprise Drill Run. Magneton carries a devastating 4x weakness to ground, so this was a pivotal moment. Aurorus would take a lot more damage from Stone Edge than Drill Run, but I knew that Magneton was coming in. Let's briefly review this and the last prediction. On the previous turn, he read my thought process and strategy very well, by preemptively sending out Aurorus to deal with the predicted Palossand. I needed to know if he was carrying a Choice Specs or Choice Scarf held item, so I decided to give it to him. Now I needed to make a big play to even things out. It's about to be Lycanroc versus Aurorus. Predicting a super effective rock-type attack, such as Stone Edge, he swaps Aurorus into Magneton, which resists rock and might be able to threaten me out with Flash Cannon, depending on my moveset, so that was a good play. I predicted that Magneton switch though, and went for Drill Run instead, completely catching him off guard and snagging a valuable KO. Not all Lycanrocs run Drill Run or proper coverage for Magneton, and he was likely hoping to bait out my Rock-type Z move, which I can only use once per battle. I just knew that on turn 10, this was finally my chance to neutralize his advantage by picking off Magneton as soon as it came in, but the battle was far from over. After his Magneton faints, he sends out his Feraligatr to threaten out my Lycanroc. In response, I switch out into Rotom-Wash, predicting a Water-type attack, but also knowing that if he uses Dragon Dance to boost his speed and attack, I can still cripple it with a Will-O-Wisp on the following turn. The burn from Will-O-Wisp cuts their physical attack stat in half, requiring 2 Dragon Dances to neutralize the effect. He does indeed go for Dragon Dance, predicting my switch, which was another fantastic play. On turn 12, I use Will-O-Wisp in case he stays in. Getting a burn on Feraligatr would dramatically reduce its ability to sweep, but my opponent is cognizant of that threat. Meanwhile, he withdraws into Ariados to scout what I'm going to do. At this point, he's not sure if I have Will-O-Wisp, but he doesn't want to risk Feraligatr to check. Ariados eats the burn just fine, and it's revealed that his held item is Black Sludge, so now I know that he's a bulky variant. Instead of switching, I decide to stay in and go for Hydro Pump, which deals around 60% to him. I went with Hydro Pump because after Stealth Rock damage and Will-O-Wisp burn, I figured that Hydro Pump would put him in range, so that the next Stealth Rock would KO him on entry. And if not, the passive burn damage would definitely finish it off. Since I had the distinct pleasure of using Ariados as my main Pokemon for my playthrough of Pokemon Moon, I know that it doesn't take these types of hits too well. It did get an extra 10 base special defense though as a buff, which I do appreciate. Meanwhile, he goes for Toxic, which poisons my Rotom-Wash, weakening its longevity. On the next turn, I go for Volt Switch, not wanting to take too much chip damage from Toxic, while he surprises me with the Protect. Since Protect negates an attack's damage for that turn, the secondary effect of Volt Switch swapping me out will fail. So Rotom is forced to stay in for an additional turn, and therefore take extra Toxic damage. Meanwhile, he takes more residual damage from the burn, but recovers it off with the Black Sludge. For the following turn, I attempt to Volt Switch yet again, because Protect has a 50% chance of failure if used consecutively. It knocks out Ariados, and gives me an opportunity to send out Delphox. In response, he sends out Aurorus yet again. Now is the moment of truth. In the last battle, well, I shouldn't spoil it for you, but Delphox was very important. However, it was a different Delphox. I've been trying to get this specific set to work for like 5 years now, and I'm happy to say that sometimes it works its magic. On turn 16, I go for another big play and use Solar Beam. This deals around 50% damage to Aurorus, and doesn't require a turn of charge because of my Power Herb held item. This is where the fun begins. I'm running this combo so that I can simultaneously consume my own held item, deal super effective damage to something that I shouldn't be able to, and also steal my opponent's held item, all in the same turn, all for the modest price of $19.99. I made this set when Pokemon X and Y came out, and it's one of my favorite off-meta builds. Delphox's hidden ability Magician allows it to steal an item, but only if Delphox itself doesn't have one, which makes this ability really fun, but also really gimmicky. Power Herb is a clever way around that restriction, since it's consumed before Magician triggers if I use Solar Beam. Its other ability Blaze is usually better though, since Delphox often lives in attack, and puts it below 33% when Blaze activates, boosting its fire-type attacks. Blaze lets it snag easier KOs, but Magician is just way more fun for me. It almost never works, except when it does. That's the slogan I live by. I also like to take their held items, since many Pokemon rely on them, so a well-timed steal can ruin their plans. Back to the game, after my Solar Beam, his Aurorus goes for Ancient Power, which deals a little over 60% to my Delphox. It so turns out though that his held item was Assault Vest, which boosts his special defense by 50%. However, since I stole that item, I managed to live this Ancient Power with plenty of HP to spare. The stolen Assault Vest raises my own special defense before I actually take the attack. On the following turn, I use Psychic, predicting him to switch out into anything but Persian. However, he switches out into exactly Persian, predicting my Psychic, which was a great play. I withdraw into Goodra, since I don't want Delphox to take damage from a Dark-type attack. Meanwhile, he goes for Fake Out. I'm less concerned with Goodra's HP now, since I'm starting to figure out a different plan to deal with Torterra. On turn 19, he goes for Z Parting Shot with his Persian, which is a one-time powerful attack with an added effect. The Z Crystal still lowers my physical and special attack, while also switching him out. This turns my Goodra into a pile of jelly. The Dark-type Z Crystal is fantastic on Persian, because it can be used with any of its Dark-type moves, depending on the situation. He then switches into his Aurorus, because the other effect of this specific Z move is that it also full heals the next Pokemon that he sends in. If Aurorus still had the Assault Vest held item, then it would have taken basically no damage at all. Instead of going for Flamethrower, I actually went for Sludge Bomb predicting his switch, and so I get the Poison off on Aurorus. This was still a fantastic play on his part. After the Poison triggers, I now withdraw into Rotom-Wash while he goes for the Rock-type Ancient Power. I take almost 40% from it, and another tick from Toxic. Aurorus has continually impressed me this game. That Pokemon does so much damage even without Choice Specs, so I shudder at the thought of how powerful Specs Aurorus can be. Choice Specs is a reasonably common held item for it, as it boosts their special attack by 50%, at the cost of locking yourself into only one move until you switch. I'm also quite fond of Choice Scarf as an option to bolster Aurorus' speed. On the next turn, I decide to stay in and use Hydro Pump, knowing that his Assault Vest held item is gone, so he'll likely get KO'd here. However, I unfortunately miss my Hydro Pump, and then I get immediately knocked out by a Freeze Dry. It happens, and a skilled player can always adapt to these situations. Freeze Dry is a cool move too, since it's an Ice-type attack that specifically deals super effective damage to water, giving Aurorus some nice offensive coverage. After Haltman faints, I send out my Gardevoir in response. On turn 22, I go for Psyshock to finish off Aurorus. I think staying in was a fine choice, since switching into Persian always runs the risk of me going for Focus Blast instead, which covers both options. Once Aurorus is down, then Torterra comes out. After unexpectedly losing my Rotom-Wash, I had to adapt. This battle was just too close, and my opponent was playing very well. I managed to even it out with a Magneton Snipe and a surprise Solar Beam, but there were still so many ways that things could go south. I thought about it for a while, and I came up with a rather interesting idea. On the previous turn, I finally got an opportunity to send out Gardevoir against his Aurorus. Since I stole his held item earlier, no shenanigans were going to happen. Gardevoir's ability before it Mega Evolves is one of my favorites. It's called Trace. Trace triggers on entry and copies the opponent's ability and gives it to my Gardevoir until I switch out. Mega Gardevoir's ability is different though. It's called Pixelate, and it makes my normal type moves become fairy type and also gives them a 20% boost. That's why I run Hyper Voice. I remembered that this Aurorus was not Snow Warning, but instead it had a very similar ability called Refrigerate. It has the same effect, but it turns normal into ice. That's also why his Aurorus has Hyper Voice. It's a really cool set. So with these similarities in mind, I thought to myself, what if I use Gardevoir's Trace to copy Refrigerate and I purposely don't Mega Evolve, which would overwrite my ability. Can I now use my Ice-type Hyper Voice to catch his Torterra off guard? Torterra is very bulky, so I knew it would live a Psyshock or Fairy-type Hyper Voice, but it wasn't going to live an Ice-type one. This series of plays was so complicated, much like with my Outrage Protect play in Battle Analysis number 1, which you can find a link to below and on the screen. I'm really happy with how this one turned out. Now back to turn 23, I hilariously get outsped by his Torterra, which goes for Woodhammer. I do live this though thanks to my oddly bulky EV spread. My opponent probably expected me to Mega Evolve, and did not consider that me tracing Refrigerate would make my Hyper Voice Ice-type, so I managed to snag a surprise KO on his Torterra. This was crucial to put me back into an advantage state, since a Fairy-type Hyper Voice or Psyshock would not have done enough damage. This play shocked both of us. I don't think anyone would play around that. Now that Torterra is down, he sends out Alolan-Persian once again. He uses Fake Out to flinch my Gardevoir, and hopefully finish it off since I'm so low on HP. This EV spread causes me to barely live Fake Out, but it doesn't really matter. Gardevoir is too low and too slow to do anything, so I'm fine with leaving it in. All I needed it to do was to take out that Torterra with a surprise Hyper Voice. Zacharias comes out, and I have it use its signature move, Accelerock. It's a base 40 power rock type attack that always goes first and is unique to Lycanroc, for now at least. 40 base power is a bit low, but the move gets a slight damage boost from my Tough Claws ability. Lycanroc gets the KO on Persian with Accelerock, putting me in a good position to close out the match. I think he made the right play by staying in, as going immediately into Feraligatr would have it take unnecessary damage. His last Pokemon, Feraligatr, is sent out. To seal the deal, I go for my unique Z move, Splintered Storm Shards. By using my Z Crystal, I don't risk Stone Edge, which can miss, and I'm not relying on an unlikely Stone Edge critical hit to win the game. This move also has the nice secondary effect of getting videos blocked in all countries, because it was used in a trailer. So if you squint your eyes, you should be able to see Lycanroc in this scene. Splintered Storm Shards is a very powerful rock-type attack, which is enough to always KO Feraligatr at 90% HP. Ending the battle with a very narrow victory. My opponent played this one super well, so major kudos to him. This is by far one of the most fun battles I've ever had on stream. It was just so close. Every battle I've had with Batusai has been excellent, and he's had his fair share of victories over me as well. I admire his creative team building, as there's so much to explore in Pokemon. My opponent did a great job keeping momentum during the first 9 turns, to the point where my back was up against the wall, and I had to go for a bold prediction with Drill Run in an attempt to break the cycle. After that, he still managed to keep the pressure on me every turn, and the decisive factor was me saving my Lycanroc until the very last turn. Stone Edge would only do around 70%, and Splintered Storm Shards usually does a guaranteed 90 to 107%. The early Stealth Rocks from Granis help soften up Feraligatr to ensure the KO, so this showcases the importance of planning ahead. By saving my Z move until the very end, I gave myself the guaranteed opportunity to close it out. I really hope that everyone enjoyed this Wi-Fi battle analysis. If you found it useful, then please do let me know in the comments and consider sharing it around. I'm always interested in your feedback and hearing what types of videos that you'd like to see from me next. You can find links to more Wi-Fi battles in the video description and at the end of the video. There are also plenty of Pokemon tutorials on my channel, more to come, and as always, your support means a lot to me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. GG, well played.